Good morning, everybody. What a day we have been given. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church in Providence, where we love beyond belief. May we make the very most of this day, starting right now together.
Join in our chalice lighting printed in your order of service. This light burns also in our hearts, and it lights our path towards harmony, justice, and hope for all.
Our invocation this morning is a covenant. There are really quite a few versions of it in different Unitarian Universalist congregations across the country. It's something that was adapted by different communities to fit them more specifically over and over again across the last 100 years. This was the covenant that was spoken aloud in worship every Sunday in the church that I trained in as a student minister for 3 years. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in friendship to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with each other and with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other. This is our time to greet each other and to do so masked and keeping, room between us, but also to make sure that we are sending care and greeting out our eyes, over our masks to each other as warmly as we can. So take a moment to stand up, turn around, say hi to the friends, strangers, wave to those near and far around you, the people up in the balcony. Let's not forget the ones in the balcony and the ones across the furthest corner from us. And then let's, as always, take a moment. They're pointing out the camera. We're sending love and greetings to everybody who's watching us from home. Hi, everybody at home. And please send your greetings back to us and wave back to us. We miss you, and we want to be together with you.
I invite you to open your hymnals, yes, the hymnals, to number 440 for a responsive reading. From the fragmented world of our everyday lives, we gather together in search of wholeness.
By many cares and preoccupations,
By diverse and selfish aims, are we separated from one another and divided within ourselves. Yet we know that no branch is utterly severed from the tree of life that sustains us all. We cherish our oneness with those around us and the countless generations that have gone before us. We would hold fast to all of good we inherit, even as we would leave behind us the outworn and the false. We would escape from bondage to the ideas of our own day and from the delusions of our own fancy. Let us labor in hope for the dawning of a new day without hatred, violence, and injustice. Let us nurture the growth in our own lives of the love that has shone in the lives of the greatest of men and women, the rays of whose lamps still illuminate our way. In this spirit we gather.
One of the ways First You transform love into action is by the sharing of the joys and the sorrows that connect us in beloved community. I begin with a candle of sympathy and an invitation. We extend our deepest sympathy and regret to Kim Ziegelmeyer and Kevin Porter on the death of their son, Waylon Ziegelmeyer, who died last week. There will be a service here for him next Friday, the 12th. The service will be an actual funeral service, so there will be calling hours from 2 to 4 in this sanctuary, and then there will be a funeral service from 4 to 5. Certainly, your presence is most welcome and appreciated. A candle of remembrance. This came from Lucille Riccatelli. Last Tuesday was the 25th anniversary of my sister Michelle's loss against her battle with cancer. I use those words because she was a warrior throughout the 5 years that she dealt with this. Tom Alburn, who was the minister at the time, visited her at hospice and said that he had never seen someone fighting to be so alive, so near the end. We keep her in blessed memory. A candle of remembrance to celebrate the lives of our good friends Jill Urban, who's 76, and Poe Adams, who's 91, both passed this fall on September 25th and October 18th, respectively. May their lives continue to be the blessing it was to so many. Another loss in our community, a candle of remembrance and sympathy for Carol Adams, who died on Friday the 29th of this month. A candle of sorrow for the passing of my dear friend Janice Salinger Saunders, a wild, brilliant, and most generous mensch. I miss her, but feel her benevolent gaze. Sending strength and hope to my dad. A candle of hope from David Francis for my friend and consummate musician Justin, courageously battling metastatic prostate cancer. May he overcome his trials, keep his spirit strong, and his music playing. A candle of healing and peace for our own Kelly Smith, as her clinical presentation has worsened quite dramatically. Cards and prayers are welcome. And with that, Kelly lights a candle for prayers and good wishes for my dear mom, Judy Smith. It's day 9 in the hospital with no real progress, and we're all pretty concerned, especially since she's still in pain. A candle of peace for Andy and Aida Wilby as they deal with an illness in their extended family. Aida's brother and sister-in-law were both stricken with COVID, with her sister-in-law in the hospital and her husband at home with cardiac issues. Cards and prayers again are welcome. And a candle of joy that our longtime family friend and a UU in Lexington, Massachusetts, is visiting us this weekend. Welcome to Fred from Karen and Hassan. My friends, let us rest in the deep knowing that we have each other to share our joys and our sorrows. It makes all the difference. I'd like us to prepare ourselves for a meditation and prayer. We will share words and breath and silence, from which I invite you to stand or raise your hand, those of you at home as well, in witness to a loss you may have had this past year. To begin, I invite you to breathe with me. Take in a deep breath, hold and release. And again. And a last time. These are familiar words from our hymnal. They are George Odell's "We Need One Another." We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone. We need one another in the hour of our success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs. And we need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again. We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. All of our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. Amen.
is so nice in the middle of this service to hear the sounds of young life returning to this worship space. This is not an especially multi-generationally oriented service or sermon, but it is really nice to have all the youngest people here today with us. So thanks for being here, youngest people. We see you. It's very nice to have you here. Hi. Last month, our ministry theme was unity and diversity, which means that sort of framed some of the topics and the approaches we used. This month, our ministry theme is gratitude. My sermon this morning begins with unity and diversity and ends with gratitude. Last May, as more and more people were becoming vaccinated and beginning to tentatively gather in small groups for particular things, my friend and colleague, Pastor Jenkins from Bethel AME, called me one day to tell me he had received outreach from a minister that he didn't know, who wanted to have a conversation about working together to bring faith values to Rhode Island's legislative agenda. Howard wasn't sure what this would look like, but he was up for the conversation and he wanted me to take part, and I agreed. So in June, 7 of us met at Bethel AME over on Rochambeau. When I arrived, the conversation had already started. The clergy were sitting carefully distanced in Bethel's pews. There were 3 white men, 3 black men, 1 Latinx man. The only clergy I knew were the black men. Howard, of course, and also Reverend Justin Lester of Congdon Street Baptist, who many of you know as well, and Pastor Mal Davis of Pleasant Street Baptist in Westerly. Now, the first 2 men, as I said, you've likely heard of before. Pastor Howard, because of our church's growing relationship with Bethel, and Justin, because Congdon Street is our near neighbor. Reverend Justin spoke to our Women's Alliance last year. Mal Davis you likely haven't heard of, and neither had I until a little over a year ago. That was when Howard got me invited to participate in a clergy conversation with the Rhode Island Department of Health. This actually happened just exactly over a year ago, last October. The conversation was about the anticipated lag in COVID vaccine uptake among communities of color in our state. People of color have a long and justified history of distrust of medical programs, and government medical programs especially. You may already know this. And I want to say, to be clear, this is not just about what happened in Tuskegee, where an enormous number of men were infected and studied with syphilis without their knowledge or consent. Back in the 1930s is when that program started, that many decades-long program started, but this is not just about that. It's not just about Henrietta Lacks in the 1950s, when her cells were used for medical experiments and profits without her knowledge or her family's knowledge. In the 1990s, Johns Hopkins did a study without consent on the effects of lead poisoning on black children in Baltimore. As if we didn't already know about it by then. The 1990s. So, while we were still a long way from viable vaccines, the Rhode Island Department of Health knew that if and when vaccines came, because we didn't even know if they were coming yet, so much has happened. They knew that extra effort would be required to help people of color choose to trust them, to trust the vaccines, to trust the Department of Health, to trust medicine. And so some of us who went to that meeting a year ago in October created a new group, Faith in Science. I just want to say that name was my idea. It's a good name, right? It was a clergy group composed almost entirely of clergy who are people of color, plus me, who would work with the Department of Health in this effort, and it took a lot of time. In the end, we became a strong 3-way coalition clergy, Rhode Island Department of Health, and some awesome leaders from United Way of Rhode Island. Together, we won a $100,000 grant from the CDC to fund and staff this project, and then another $10,000 grant as well. We built a committed and fulfilling relationship between us. I am sometimes the only white person in our meetings. I remain so honored to have been invited and included and trusted by my partners and now friends in this effort. We have established a bunch of new vaccine sites in the state. We have a big public launch and celebration of faith and science next weekend in Dexter Park. You guys are maybe the first people to see our brand new logo. I put it on the cover of the Order of Service. All of this is meant to help bring communities of color positive energy and information to the vaccine debate that is still so real, particularly among those who have the strongest reasons for their skepticism. Our work is not done, and our goal is not achieved. And it has been so much work and one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. I want you to know about this because part of why I do it is because of this church's declaration and commitment that Black lives matter. And if so, then this work is important not just to me, but to all of us. On behalf of all of us, and it is my privilege to do what I can as your minister to contribute to this effort that will, we hope and believe, save Black lives and the lives of many people of color across our state. So, Pastor Mal Davis, myself, and Howard Jenkins from Bethel are the three co-chairs of the Faith and Science Clergy Coalition. Mal Davis and I have become friends entirely via Zoom. And often in those meetings, he likes to razz me, and I almost always fall for it. I had never met him in person until the day of that meeting at Bethel in June. And I didn't really meet him then either, because when I came in, they'd already started the conversation, so I slid into a pew behind the one where he was sitting, and I recognized him, and we nodded at each other, but there wasn't time for anything else. And I just turned my attention to the speaker. And honestly, I can't remember who was speaking when I entered. What I can remember is the gist of the larger conversation. The three white ministers all spoke about wanting to listen, wanting to learn and hear more about white privilege and understand more about pervasive racism. They knew they had work to do as white men within and around themselves. And the Black ministers were welcoming that message, but were speaking about the fact that the work is hard and it would take time to build trusted connections and opportunities to really do the work. And the Latinx minister saw the world in almost Book of Revelation terms as a tainted place with great challenges before holiness could prevail. Eventually, the conversation circled around to what we all might accomplish together to advance legislation that would hold up faithful priorities. And I was thinking maybe anti-poverty or stewardship of the earth work for climate justice. Maybe we could be new allies in working for legislation against gun violence. It turned out, as I listened to what one of the white ministers was proposing, that what they were concerned about was attacks on families and youth, and they were concerned about family values. They were especially unhappy about the impact of gay marriage, and now on top of that, legislation protecting the rights and identity of trans people, especially trans and non-binary children. They literally saw all these as attacks that needed to be met by a strong faith coalition that would draw new lines in the sand. And that's what they wanted all the rest of the work and connections to move towards. Howard pointed out that if there really was going to be a strong faith coalition, it would take a lot of time to build and would have to find some shared ground that everyone was ready to work on. Maybe the shared ground would end up looking very different from what they were proposing. It would depend on how the relationships developed over time, given that any clergy coalition would have a range of perspectives to reconcile. And one of the white men said, yes, but only to a point. We are not interested in sleeping with the enemy. All this time, I had listened and taken it in. All of the rest of the people in that meeting had spoken at least once at some length. You may have noticed at this point, as I told you this story, that I was the only female clergy person in the room. And I was beginning to feel like a spy. The more the white ministers spoke, the more it became clear that I was on the far side of their goals, perhaps the furthest side of anyone in the room. So I needed to identify myself and what I stood for and who I stood for. I raised my hand and I got recognized and I began to speak for the first time. I shared my name and church, and I said, as I'm listening to you, I'm beginning to feel I am the enemy you're talking about. And that was as far as I got. Immediately, one of the white men began to gather his things as if he was going to leave, while protesting that what I was starting to say and saying that now this felt like a setup to him. I kept speaking, but he and the other white men were talking over me and at me all at the same time, all three of them, attacking what little I was able to say and decrying my presence at the meeting at all. Being a woman in ministry is less uncommon than it used to be, but it is not easy. This is, after all, the one vocation from which women can still be legally excluded in this country. Even so, this was extreme. Nevertheless, I persevered. And it didn't matter. You all know me, I'm not a shrinking violet. But no matter how determinedly I spoke, they talked over me and around me and would not let me speak. I could not be heard. I could not be heard. And I finally stopped trying. This is when Howard Jenkins, who was, after all, hosting this gathering at his church, stepped in. He pointed out that they had kept saying they wanted to listen, that they knew they had a lot to learn. He pointed out the conversation had acknowledged some exchanges would be difficult and that it didn't work to get ready to leave as soon as things got tough. He pointed out that I was known to him and trusted by him, and they were not. And if they wanted this connection to happen in good faith, then they needed to show some good faith now. Reverend Justin chimed in with support, and so did Pastor Mel. And the three white guys quieted down. They began to listen to what the black men were saying. And eventually they agreed, and they let me talk. They let me talk. They decided they would allow me, permit me to speak. Not because of my office or my tenure of ministry or the place of this congregation in Rhode Island, not because of anything they perceived in me or about me, but because Howard and Justin and Mal, those men, those three black men, won me the space, the permission to open my mouth and be heard. Intersectionality. Intersectionality, this word that is heard so often these days. It means the interconnected nature of social categories such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination and disadvantage. In case you were wondering just exactly how do you define that. There is so much here to unpack. Gender, OMGSH. I felt in that moment like I was inhabiting The Handmaid's Tale. All my privileges and rights and possibilities and value were determined by the men in the room. And race, it was the black men in the room, all of whom know what it is to live in a world that challenges your right to be and do, who held the space for my rights as a minister in that group. Still more to unpack. What friendship and faithfulness and interfaith dialogue each really look like and really mean, and where and when their meanings break down or don't among us all. When I was finally able to speak and be heard, I talked about how clear it is to me that while there are real theological differences between those of us who were in Bethel that day, my people, this church, all of you, are filled, overflowing, people who are as deeply faithful and good with a capital G, good, as any people could ever be. That in fact, while our reasons for the ways we live our faith of compassion and respect, spirituality and justice making may be very different from those of Christian conservatives, the underlying values are the same as those Jesus professed and taught. Care for the stranger, for the vulnerable, for the poor and those in need. Just as Jesus affirmed the worth of those in his society and time who were condemned or persecuted, we too hold up the inherent worth and dignity of all and work to safeguard and protect those our society wrongs now. I talked about the courage and the valor of all my people, of you, and the ways you inspire me with your living and your wisdom and your courage. And because of the tenor of the conversation, I spoke explicitly about our gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, transgender, non-binary members and friends who manage the challenges of living your own lives in this inimical world and still prioritize justice for all, working to counter racism within and beyond you, your efforts for climate justice, your commitment to the food pantry, all the ways your own struggles inform but never define or constrain you. I was so angry as I strove to channel my faith and experience into words that I started to cry as I was speaking with anger. And I continued to lose tears almost the whole time I said my piece. As I began to speak and started to cry, Mal Davis, who, please remember, I had never seen in person before that day, who I had never actually spoken to live, Mal, who razzes me and shows up and does so much. Mal slid over in his pew and he reached over the back of it to me and he held out his hand. And I took it. And he held my hand the whole time I spoke. And it was not awkward. It went on for minutes, and it wasn't weird holding hands with this stranger that I know, this comrade of countless Zooms, this Black Baptist pastor who has become my friend. when I was done, Pastor Howard picked his thread back up, and he reiterated his point that we had a lot of work to do and different faiths and perspectives to reconcile, and if we were to find common ground on which to build a legislative agenda, it would take time and commitment. And the conversation continued, and the meeting went way over time. And eventually I had to leave, and Justin Lester got up and walked out with me and checked in with me and told me he had come to a more progressive place from a position very much like the one those white ministers still hold. He understood them and believed both in the possibility of change and in the reality of their current stance. I did too. I believe in the possibility of change and the reality of what people believe now. That's almost the essence of Unitarian Universalism, with our belief that revelation is ongoing. I got an email the next day. It read, "Liz, I am the white-haired man who sat in the front row at the meeting yesterday afternoon. I want to apologize for my response to you yesterday. You had shared your heart, and I attacked you with arguments. I had hoped to have a chance to speak with you after the meeting, but you had to leave before it was over. This was my first known encounter," those are his quotes, "this was my first known encounter with a Universalist minister. And I am afraid I have been taught stereotypes, which is what I reacted to. I want you to know that your sharing touched my heart, and I hope to have the opportunity to hear you as a person in the future. I believe that God wants to use these encounters to open our hearts. At least that is what I believe He is doing with me. Again, I am so sorry for how I responded to you and hope to have the opportunity to know you better. Blessings, John." Three years ago, Tandayaka, one of our faith's theologians and teachers, came and spoke with us about love beyond belief. Love moving through us that transcends the diversity in our personal beliefs as Unitarian Universalists and binds us as a congregation to a greater vision and a greater whole because of our union. 2 years ago, Howard Jenkins and I began to deepen our friendship and connections between our two churches. He and I spoke about this last December in our shared worship service, that we were encountering a new level of love beyond belief that transcends the real differences between our churches, our denominations, our faiths, that bridges the theological diversity between us with the shared values that we all hold, offering us a still greater vision and a still greater whole because of our union. Now, last spring, yet another level of love beyond belief reveals itself. The possibility of being in dialogue with those whose very values are different, along with their theologies, and the question of whether and how this can be done. Generally, I don't like to preach about things I haven't figured out. Believing that it's not enough to frame questions always from the pulpit. It's important to offer some answers, or at least prospects towards answers. But as we know, meaning is sometimes more about the journey than the destination. I answered John's email with reservation and also with hope. Telling you this story today writing it down for you over the last couple days fills me with a renewed sense of gratitude for the painful revelation that day was, and humility about what might be ahead. That clergy group has not met again yet. John and I have not crossed paths again yet. Maybe we shouldn't wait for a whole meeting. Maybe he should just reach out again himself. Maybe I should. Maybe I will. Maybe this is what it takes to open his heart to me and mine. Maybe this is what it takes to open my heart to him and his. Maybe this is what it takes to open our hearts to others. Maybe you have something you've been thinking about. Maybe you will do it. Maybe this is a beginning. Maybe every incarnation of love beyond belief is a beginning. It's not the end and the goal. Maybe every incarnation of love beyond belief is a beginning rife with possibilities that we cannot even imagine from that beginning. I'm beginning to think it is so. Amen. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for your many gifts, including now the gift of your offering to the life and the work of this beloved community. Please give as generously as you are able, because it is sustaining the present and the future of our people. Thank you for all that you give and all that you do and all that you are.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our with love and amazing grace when our heart is in a holy place. When we share the silence of sacred space and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
We have 3 invitations for you, ways to live out our faith in particular ways that are coming up. Next week's service is going to be led by myself and the Mosaic team, a group that works to support and advance multicultural inclusion and anti-racism here at First Unitarian. The Mosaic team members will share what calls them each to this challenging work in their own lives and in our congregation. And in addition, as part of supporting First U in living more deeply into our principles and values, the Mosaic steering team will offer a series of 3 Saturday workshops called Let's Talk About Race. We urge you to attend. Please save these dates. You will see them many times, but here I am about to tell you, in case anybody needs to grab a pen and a piece of paper, you can write on your order of service. February 5th, March 12th, April 9th. February 5th, March 12th, April 9th. These professionally led workshops will offer an opportunity to engage in small group discussions about issues of anti-racism that are crucial to all of us. Please feel free to take the opportunity to talk with one of the Mosaic team members after this service if you have questions. Many of them are here today. Please stand as I call your name. Louise Sloan, Lee Rodman, Kate Niles, Claire Rosenbaum, Janet Braylove. Thank you. Also, we are in a time of transition for us as we think about ways to diversify our musical offerings here at the church and prepare for an incoming permanent music director. Our First U Music Committee is interviewing members and friends of our church about the music program, about its past, its present, its future. We want to hear from everyone who has anything to say about what you have liked or disliked in our music program, what you want to hear or play or sing more of in future church gatherings. Throughout the fall, you will see music committee members at Zoom coffee hour or out in the front yard after worship. We encourage everyone to take time to chat with them. They are very identifiable because they wear cow ears. And yeah, I actually have to explain it. They put it into the thing because music committee is like moo committee, moo com, moo, cow ears. Get it? They are also working on a way to interview people still participating remotely, so there will hopefully be an electronic or printed survey forthcoming for everybody at home. So please do seek them out. As I said, it's hard to miss them. Also, some at church have been asking why life at church is not yet back to normal, and we know that it is hard and frustrating to be doing this long, slow unfolding and waiting for what is not happening yet. Today, right here in the meeting house after worship, everyone is invited to stay and hear from 2 of our health experts who are helping the COVID-19 task force here at First U form and update policies and protocols as COVID realities evolve. Dr. David Anthony is a physician connected with Brown University Medical School and also an active member at First U. Nathaniel Fuchs is an active participant at First U, and he is a COVID epidemiologist at the Rhode Island Department of Health. They will explain the facts and processes being used to help make our decisions, and they welcome your questions. So if you would like to learn more about the understandings and principles guiding our journey back from COVID, every congregation is different, Please stay for this important opportunity. And can we join now in the words for our responsive benediction, number 464. So back to your hymnals and take a moment. 464. That's a nice idea, Roger. Let's all rise as we are able for this. And then all that has divided us will merge.
And then compassion will be wedded to power.
And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind.
And then both men and women will be gentle.
And then both men and women will be strong.
And then no person will be subject to another's will.
And then all will be rich and free and varied.
And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many.
And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance.
And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old.
And then all will nourish the young.
And then all will cherish life's creatures.
And then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth.
And then everywhere will be called Eden once again.
Please join me in the words for our chalice extinguishing. We
Carry the flame of peace and love and hope until we meet again.